She whispered in fear, her voice trembling, "Please, don't take the cloth off." The rancher froze, torn between compassion and curiosity. But when his hands moved and the cloth slid away, what he saw made his knees buckle. His whole world was about to change forever. You won't believe the twist in this story, so stay till the very end, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more heart-stopping stories like this one. The night had fallen heavy over the wide, barren lands of Redstone Valley, and the lonely rancher, Daniel Hargrove, guided his tired horse back toward the creaking gates of his ranch, unaware that destiny had placed something far more haunting than cattle or storms in his path. Daniel was a man hardened by years of labor, tragedy, and solitude, a man who had lost his wife to sickness and buried his only child after a river accident, a man who now lived with silence as his only companion. Yet that silence was about to be torn apart when he spotted something unusual by the broken fence near the edge of his land. A figure, frail, collapsed on the ground, wrapped entirely in a large dusty cloth that looked more like a burial shroud than a blanket, trembling against the cold earth, whispering words too faint to hear. He dismounted, every instinct torn between caution and compassion, his boots crunching against the dry soil as he approached, the moonlight falling across the shape of what looked like a young woman. When he bent down, he heard her broken voice for the first time, hoarse with desperation. "Please, don't take the cloth off." And his heart froze, for the plea was drenched in terror, as though the simple act of uncovering her might unleash something unbearable. But Daniel was a rancher, not a man to believe in superstitions, yet the trembling in her words stirred a forgotten ache in his chest, the same ache he had felt when his daughter once begged him not to leave her alone by the river before she slipped beneath the current. Shaking the memory away, he spoke gently, "You're safe now, miss. You're on my land. I won't harm you." But she clutched the cloth tighter, her pale fingers gripping with strength born from fear, eyes hidden beneath the folds, tears staining the edges of fabric. Daniel wrestled with his thoughts. Should he call the sheriff? Should he leave her? Or should he help her? But something in her trembling form whispered of a greater truth, something he could not walk away from. So he lifted her gently, cloth and all, onto his horse and carried her back toward his ranch house, unaware that with each hoofbeat, fate was dragging him deeper into a storm of secrets. When they arrived at the cabin, the lantern light revealed only fragments of her form. Beneath a heavy wrapping, her breath ragged, her body frail, and he laid her carefully on the old wooden bed his late wife once slept in. He brought water, bread, a blanket, but she only repeated the same words with shivering desperation. "Don't take the cloth off. Please, you must not." And her voice cracked as if she feared death itself was waiting under the fabric. And though every part of Daniel wanted to respect her plea, curiosity gnawed at him like wolves at the edge of firelight. He sat by her, watching the cloth move slightly with the rhythm of her breathing, wondering if she was burned, disfigured, hunted, or worse. And in the stillness he felt an old wound opening in him, the wound of a father who had once failed to protect his child. Now perhaps fate was offering him a chance to protect another's soul, though it came wrapped in mystery. As the hours passed, thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, promising a storm by dawn, and Daniel dozed lightly by the fire when sudden murmurs broke his rest. The girl, still wrapped, whispered names he had never heard. "Evelyn, don't let them find me. They'll kill us all." And her body shook violently as though trapped in nightmare. Daniel rose, placed a steadying hand over the fabric at her shoulder, and assured her, "You're safe here. Nobody will touch you." But the moment his hand pressed against the cloth, he felt something strange beneath. Bones too sharp, muscles trembling unnaturally, as if her body carried wounds or deformities far beyond ordinary. He pulled back quickly, unsettled, staring at the fabric that separated him from a truth she refused to reveal, and his mind spiraled into dread and wonder. What could she be hiding that terrified her so deeply? The storm arrived by morning, rain lashing the windows, wind howling against the shutters, and still she lay there, silent except for the occasional sob. Daniel decided to tend to his cattle quickly, but before stepping out, he paused at the doorway, turning back, feeling a pull to stay but forcing himself to leave. When he returned soaked and cold, he found her sitting upright for the first time, the cloth still wrapped but her posture tense, and she asked him in a soft, trembling voice, "Why did you bring me here?" Daniel hesitated, then answered with honesty, "Because you looked like you needed saving, and I couldn't walk away." But her eyes, barely visible through a small tear in the cloth, filled with sorrow deeper than anything he had seen, and she whispered, "You don't know what you've done." The following days tested Daniel's resolve, for whispers of strangers began spreading through the valley, rumors of riders asking about a runaway girl, a reward posted in town for anyone with information. The description fit too closely, though none mentioned the cloth, and Daniel's suspicion grew. Was she a fugitive, a victim, or something far stranger? His nights became restless, the sound of her soft sobs drifting through the dark, always punctuated with the same plea whenever he drew near. "Please, don't take the cloth off." Yet Daniel could no longer ignore the weight of mystery. Her body seemed too fragile for ordinary wounds, her silence too heavy for ordinary secrets. And on the fourth night, when lightning cracked the sky and shook the house, he finally let his trembling hands drift toward the folds, his heart pounding, torn between fear and duty, whispering to himself that perhaps unveiling her truth was the only way to protect her. "Don't!" Her voice shattered the thunder, louder and sharper than before, filled with desperate terror. "Don't take it off. If you do, nothing will ever be the same." Daniel froze, his hand inches from the fabric, staring into the hidden face of a woman whose fear seemed to pierce his very soul. Yet something inside him, a mixture of guilt for failing his daughter and a stubborn desire to protect what he could not understand, pushed him further. He pulled at the first fold of cloth, and as the fabric loosened, her cry echoed through the cabin like a warning from another world. The lantern flickered, the storm raged, and Daniel finally peeled away enough to glimpse what lay beneath, and his body went cold, his breath stuck in his throat, his hands trembling uncontrollably, for what he saw was not the face of an ordinary woman, but something marked, scarred, yet also eerily radiant, something that whispered of both suffering and miracle, something that shook the foundations of his very belief, leaving him gasping in silence, unable to reconcile the truth with the world he thought he knew. And as his knees threatened to give way, the girl, now partially revealed, whispered through her tears, "You shouldn't have done that. Now it has begun." Daniel staggered back, his body trembling violently as though struck by lightning, staring at the partially uncovered girl who lay trembling on his bed, her face pale yet strangely luminous, marked by jagged scars that traced across her cheeks like rivers of fire, but within those scars glowed faint lines of light, faint as though her very flesh carried something unearthly. He could not comprehend what he saw. Was it disease? Was it a curse? Was it divine? Or was it something beyond human understanding? And as his mind reeled, the girl pulled the cloth desperately back over herself with a sobbing cry. "Why did you not listen? Why couldn't you leave it?" Daniel fell to his knees, his heart slamming in his chest, whispering, "What are you?" But her answer came not in words but in tears that rolled down her cheeks, searing faint trails of light into the fabric, as if her sorrow itself burned through the world. For long minutes the storm outside raged while the storm inside Daniel's soul screamed louder, because everything he had ever believed, God, sin, salvation, fate, suddenly trembled under the weight of what lay before him. When finally her sobs calmed, she whispered in a broken voice, "I am cursed, I am hunted, and if they find me here, they will kill you too." But Daniel, still shaking, whispered back, "Cursed or not, you're still a child of God, and no one deserves to be left in the dirt. If you are hunted, then let them come to me." She shook her head furiously, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. They are not men you can fight. They are men who sold themselves to shadows, who want what flows in my blood, who would burn this valley to ash to silence me. You cannot protect me, not when you've already seen what was never meant to be seen." Daniel clenched his fists, his stubborn rancher's resolve rising against fear. "Maybe I couldn't save my daughter. Maybe I couldn't save my wife. But I'll be damned before I let you be taken from under my roof." The following days twisted like a nightmare in daylight. Whispers in the town grew louder, strangers on horseback seen riding the ridge, neighbors asking questions too pointed to be casual, and Daniel felt the walls closing in. The girl, who finally revealed her name as Alara, remained wrapped in the cloth but began to trust him enough to speak in fragments, telling him she had escaped from men who called themselves the Circle, men who believed her blood could heal or destroy, men who had kept her captive since childhood, feeding off the miracles her body unwillingly performed. She told him of nights when they cut her skin and the wounds glowed before sealing, of days when they made her touch the dying and watch them rise again, of punishments when she refused to obey, scars of which now burned faintly beneath her cloth. Daniel listened in horror, unable to comprehend how such cruelty could exist, yet also unable to shake the memory of her glowing tears, proof that her words were no fantasy. He asked her why she had begged him not to remove the cloth, and her answer chilled him. "Because every time someone sees me, the Circle feels it, as if a bond pulls them closer, as if they are tied to me by sight itself, and now that you've seen me, they are coming." True enough, within a week riders arrived at the outskirts of his land, black-coated figures with no names and no kindness in their eyes, and Daniel's heart nearly stopped when he saw them from the barn window. He armed himself with his rifle, though some part of him knew bullets would not be enough, and when he returned to the cabin, Alara's hands clutched his arm, shaking. "You must let me go. I will leave. I will draw them away. You cannot fight them." But Daniel roared with a father's broken fury. "I've already buried one child. I won't bury another, not while I draw breath." Alara's eyes brimmed with glowing tears again, but this time she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his, whispering, "Then you must be ready to carry more than you ever thought you could bear." At that very moment, the front door shuddered under the pounding of fists. Voices outside demanding entry, claiming authority from the county, though Daniel knew their accents did not belong to this land. He shouted back that this was private property, that they had no right. But when the door splintered and shadows poured in, Daniel fired, the echo deafening, and 2 figures fell. But what spilled from them was not blood alone, it was smoke, black and writhing, as if their very flesh was consumed by darkness. Daniel stumbled back, horrified, reloading with shaking hands, while Alara screamed, the glow beneath her cloth blazing so bright it lit the room. The invaders recoiled, their voices hissing in languages Daniel did not know, but their fear was evident. And in that chaos, Daniel realized the truth. Alara was not merely cursed, she was their weapon and their weakness, the thing they both hunted and feared. The fight that followed seared itself into Daniel's memory forever. Gunfire, smoke, the smell of brimstone, the cries of Alara as she begged him not to die for her, and the relentless determination of a broken rancher who refused to bow. When the last of the shadows retreated into the storm, leaving corpses that melted into black stains on his wooden floor, Daniel collapsed beside Alara, blood on his hands, sweat pouring from his brow, whispering, "What have I brought upon my house?" Alara, trembling, pulled the cloth tighter, whispering, "The beginning. This is only the beginning." That night, Daniel could not sleep. He sat by the window staring at the rain, hearing distant hooves that told him more would come, and his soul warred within him, fear urging him to abandon her, grief urging him to keep her, and faith whispering that perhaps she was the miracle he had prayed for all these years without knowing it. The following morning, Alara finally told him more. Told him that she had been born not of ordinary parents but of a line that traced back centuries, a bloodline cursed to carry both light and destruction, worshipped by some, hunted by others. She was raised in captivity, never seeing the world until her escape, guided only by whispers she believed came from her sister Evelyn, though she had never seen her. Daniel listened in silence, gripping the cross that still hung around his neck, wondering if God's hand had truly placed her in his field that night, or if the devil was testing him with a burden too heavy to bear. Yet even as he doubted, something in Alara's fragile courage touched the deepest wound in him, the wound of a father who had lost everything. He told her, "If you are cursed, then I will share your curse. If you are hunted, then they will have to hunt me too." And for the first time, Alara smiled faintly through her tears, though her smile was tinged with sorrow, whispering, "You don't understand how heavy those words are." Days turned to weeks, and though danger lurked, a strange bond formed between them. Daniel taught her simple ranch work, letting her feed the chickens while always wrapped, letting her touch the soil and smile faintly at the feel of freedom she had never known. In return, Alara healed his wounds when the invaders' blades had cut him, her glowing hands sealing flesh as though time itself obeyed her, and Daniel, though unnerved, began to see her not as a burden but as the daughter he had lost, a second chance given by fate, yet fate is never so kind. And one evening when the valley lay drenched in golden sunset, a rider appeared at the gate, not cloaked in black like the others, but a woman, her hair braided, her voice trembling as she called Daniel's name, and when Alara heard it, she froze, her entire body shaking, whispering with awe and fear, "That voice! It's Evelyn!" Daniel rushed to the door, his rifle ready, but when his eyes met the rider's, he saw something haunting, the same glow faintly burning beneath her skin, the same scars faintly carved across her cheeks, and he realized Alara's whispered prayers had not been fantasy. Evelyn was real. Evelyn had come, but whether she came as salvation or doom, Daniel could not yet know. The air froze between them as the rider dismounted, her boots sinking into the mud, her eyes locked not on Daniel but on the trembling figure behind him, and her whisper cracked the silence like a blade. "Alara." Daniel's grip tightened on the rifle, unsure if this stranger was salvation or a new trap, but Alara stepped forward, cloth still wrapped tight, her whole body shaking as tears spilled down, glowing faintly as they struck the earth. "Evelyn, it's you! After all these years!" The woman dropped her reins, stumbling toward the porch, her own eyes wet, and Daniel saw now the scars across her skin, the same cursed glow that marked Alara, though older, deeper, as though time had carved its fury into her. When they embraced, cloth against cloth, Daniel felt something stir in the air, a tremor that rattled the windows, as if their bloodline meeting in one place awoke forces larger than them, and Evelyn whispered fiercely, "I've searched for you, I've bled for you, but you shouldn't have come here. They're watching, always watching." Daniel stepped forward, voice steady. "Then let them watch. This is my land, and I'll bury every man who dares cross it." But Evelyn's haunted eyes turned to him, shaking her head. "You don't understand, rancher. The circle doesn't die, it spreads, it consumes, and once it marks you, there's no turning back." She lifted her sleeve, revealing flesh branded not with scars but with a sigil that pulsed faintly like living fire, and Alara gasped, "They marked you too." And Evelyn nodded. "I carry their curse, but I also carry their secrets, secrets that may be the only chance we have." That night, as the sisters sat by the fire, Evelyn told her story, how she too had been taken, how she had submitted when Alara resisted, believing obedience would protect them both, but instead it only made her a vessel for their experiments. She had healed kings in secret, killed enemies with a touch, watched her own captors kneel in fear, but when she finally escaped, she realized freedom was not escape, for the circle's shadow lingered wherever she went, and now they would come for Alara not just to recapture her, but to unite their bloodlines in a ritual meant to unleash something far darker than healing, a storm of death bound to their name. Daniel listened, fists clenched, his faith tested as Evelyn's words carved dread into him, but he forced himself to speak. "Then tell me what must be done, because if I have to give my life, I'll give it." but I won't let them take her." Evelyn studied him for a long moment, then whispered, "You already have given it, rancher. The moment you lifted her from that field, your life was no longer your own." The days that followed felt like borrowed time, the ranch heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional murmur of sisters reunited. Yet Daniel could not shake the sense that something was building, a storm not of weather but of fate. And one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the ground itself began to tremble. Distant riders appeared again, but this time not in handfuls, dozens, scores, their black coats stretching like a tide across the valley, torches burning in their hands, voices chanting words that curdled the air. Daniel loaded his rifle, his heart pounding with grim finality, and turned to Alara and Evelyn, who stood together wrapped in their cloth, their eyes glowing faintly in the dusk, and whispered, "If this is the end, then we face it together." Evelyn shook her head, her voice fierce. "No, the end is not ours to give, it is theirs. Tonight we decide whether their circle breaks or whether we fall into it forever." The battle erupted like thunder, black-cloaked figures swarming the ranch, shadows spilling like smoke, Daniel firing until his rifle was empty, then grabbing his revolver, then finally swinging the axe he once used for wood, refusing to yield even as his body bled from countless cuts. But in the midst of chaos, the sisters stood in the storm, their cloths falling away at last, light pouring from their scars like rivers of fire, their voices rising in harmony as if singing an ancient song, and everywhere the light touched, shadows screamed, burning away like paper in flame. Daniel fell to his knees, half in awe, half in terror, watching as the sisters raised their hands together, their glow merging into a single radiant blaze that split the night sky, forcing the invaders back. But just as victory seemed within reach, the leader of the circle stepped forward, a figure taller than the rest, his face hidden beneath a hood, his voice like stone cracking, "Daughters of light, your blood belongs to us." And with a gesture, the torches of his men flared black, consuming the air with choking smoke. Alara staggered, her glow faltering, and Evelyn screamed, clutching her, "They're binding us, they're turning our gift into chains." Daniel, despite his wounds, surged forward with the axe, swinging at the hooded man, but the blow was caught with one hand, as if steel meant nothing, and Daniel was thrown to the mud like a rag doll, blood filling his mouth, his strength nearly gone. He looked up, blurry, and saw Alara staring, tears blazing like molten silver, and she whispered through the din, "You saved me once, let me save you now." With one final cry, Alara tore herself free from Evelyn's grasp and stepped into the midst of the circle, pulling the cloth from her body fully for the first time, revealing the full blaze of her scars, her entire form shining like a living star. The circle screamed, shadows burning, men collapsing, the hooded leader shielding his face as cracks split across his form, smoke hissing from within. Evelyn screamed her sister's name, trying to reach her, but the light was too blinding, forcing even Daniel to shield his eyes. When at last the blaze dimmed, silence fell upon the valley, the invaders gone, their ashes drifting like black snow, and in the center stood only Evelyn, weeping on her knees, her hands clutching at nothing, for Alara was gone, consumed by the light she unleashed, her sacrifice burning her from the world. Daniel dragged himself forward, his body broken, his soul heavier than ever, and placed a trembling hand on Evelyn's shoulder, whispering, "She saved us all. She saved me too." Evelyn, through tears, whispered, "She was always the brave one. I was always the coward." But Daniel shook his head, forcing his pain into words. "No, you're the one who lives, the one who carries her with you. And if I've learned anything tonight, it's that miracles don't come without pain." In the weeks that followed, the ranch stood scarred, its walls blackened, its fences broken, but Daniel rebuilt piece by piece, his body healing slowly, his heart still bleeding. Evelyn stayed, helping, her own scars burning faintly each night as though Alara's spirit lived within her now, and together they found a rhythm, a broken family forged by loss and light. Sometimes Daniel swore he heard Alara's voice in the wind, whispering not in fear but in peace. Please, don't take the cloth off. Not as a warning anymore, but as a memory of the night everything changed. The night a rancher found a miracle buried beneath suffering. The night a cursed girl became a savior. And though the circle's shadow still lingered in the corners of the earth, Daniel knew that as long as Evelyn drew breath, as long as scars glowed faintly against the dark, the light would never be extinguished. And so he stood each dawn at the edge of his land, scarred, weary, but unbroken, whispering to the rising sun, I couldn't save my child then, but I saved one now. And maybe that's enough.